All right, Golf Clash has announced a new tournament that's starting on May 25th, and it's going to be the Safari Sunrise. And this is going to be at the Arcasia Reserve. So you can go to a Golf Clash notebook and pull up the Acacia Reserve holes. These holes have only been played one time. This is kind of like what we just played in the Spring Major. We've got holes that we've only played once before. We played them in the 2019 Summer Major. And so whenever new holes come out, and these holes have been in Tour 9, so if you've been playing Tour 9 and you're playing an upper stuff, and you've probably got a little more practice. The only time I've ever played these holes is in the 2019 Summer Major. So whenever new holes come out, it's really all the focus on the par fours and the par fives. For me, the way that I play, my big focus, and I usually do really good when brand new holes come out because we have a limited amount of practice time before the tournament starts. And my focus is usually on par fours and par fives to try and get them dialed in. And then par threes are get your birdie and get the hell out of there. So usually the second time we play them, I have a pretty good idea of how I want to play the par fours and par fives. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. I heard a turkey in my yard. I live in town. I live in Salem, Oregon, and there's a new development not too far from my house, and they flushed out a whole bunch of wild turkeys, and they're cruising through my neighborhood. And I've been having a bunch of them roosting in the trees behind my house. Let's checking it out. All right, so on this hole right here, this par four. Let me get my pen working here. We can't talk about this stuff without a pen. Come on, where is my pen? Draw on the screen. There we go. Drawing on the screen. All right. Let's erase that. Get that back up there. All right. So here's the safe play. The safe play is you can lay up right here. And the last time we were in a tournament, the wind was blowing kind of in this direction. So if you can lay up out here, you've got I can't remember if it was like most of what you're looking at here is long iron. So you've got a long iron shot straight into the cup with the wind behind you if the wind's blowing this way. So that's really the safe play at it. And the deal is at the time when the Summer Major came out, we didn't have the Grizzly. Pretty much your most accurate club that you were going to get was going to be a backbone. And I never really liked the backbone. It just seemed like it wasn't my favorite club in the bag. I didn't have a lot of confidence in it, and I still don't. And I will never use it again because we got the Grizzly out. But you did have a decent shot right here. But anytime we're on these par fours, if there's a way to get into your short iron range, that's, and I don't even think if you could get all the way to the front unless you brought a super big ball or you could push the red line forward. I don't know that you could get into your short iron range. Maybe you could get in your short iron range back here and you could run it up. But this is not my typical type of on these par fours trying to make it. So what I was doing was at rest with an extra mile and a Titan. At rest, I was 3 rings off of this transitional surface. I had blue ring off of this transitional surface. With the wind going in this direction, I was taking the wind out and doing a max overpower hook shot and landing right here, and it would clip the rough and then bleed out. And where it was putting me out here, it was in mid short iron. And while I was having to hit that with a side wind, it was pretty much a straight up shot. I wasn't having to do any elevation adjustment, and it was just making sure you get the wind out and hitting it perfect. One of the things that we don't experience a lot in rookie that you get when you start getting into maybe a little in pro, but really when you start getting into expert is the secondary wind effect. We don't have as much of that here, especially when you're in mid short iron. So even though I was hitting against a side wind, the opportunity to get into mid short iron versus hitting a long iron was definitely beneficial. So I was going for this max overpower hook shot. At the time during the summer major, the 2019 summer major, I don't even think I had an apocalypse. At that point I'd played for slightly over 2 years, like 2 years and 2 months, and still did not have an apocalypse. And at that time I'd probably won at least 1,000 Tour 7 chess, and still did not have an apocalypse. But I have an apocalypse now, and one of the things about this shot was sometimes on this shot, I caught it where I came up and did the rough bump, which is what I was trying to do. First bounce down in here, second bounce clipping the rough, and then rolling out into the fairway. Sometimes I caught this just right, and I'm not sure what the deal was, where I actually hit way the hell down into this hole. First bounce down in the hole, second bounce, first bounce here, second bounce cleared the rough, and then put me in the rough out here. And while I don't like taking these types of rough shots, I did make that shot. I think I was out there in the rough probably 4 times that week, and I hit it about 50% of the time where I made the rough shot. It's not ideal. Ideally, I wanted to clip the rough and bleed out into here. When the tournament was over, when you think about arc distance, so from the tee box, and let's scroll back a little so we can see the tee box. So from the tee box here, my red line was out in this area. So if we draw that line there and then we draw an arc on like where we can get, I could have, I'm not sure if I brought a big enough ball out if I could make this area here or getting in this. Like over here, there's also a max overpower hook shot that you could do, and you may need more curl, and this may be an APOC. I think I tried it one time early on in the week and my extra mile didn't have enough curl, but I now have an apocalypse, and with the club card trading, I've been able to get that apocalypse up to level 4. So I'm not sure how I'm going to play this hole. This is the safe shot to lay up out here and go straight at it, especially if the wind is blowing in this direction. That's an ideal spot. A lot of people are going to have grizzlies in their bag now, so they're going to have an option other than the backbone. You're going to have a little bit better ball guide, especially if you got upper developed clubs. Not a bad way to go at it. But if I can get out here into my mid short iron range, you know, that to me is better than hitting a long iron shot, even against a crosswind. But I'm going to work on this shot right here. I'm going to see like what's possible and see if it's possible to do a max overpower hook shot from this side, trying to come through this gap and get up to the hole so that I'm either on this fairway over here or I'm on the green. I'm going to try it out. There's enough distance here. Like when I did clear, when I was out in this area and I actually got deep down in the hole and cleared it and bounced on the other side, where I was getting out in the rough, if, you know, like arc wise out here, I was just like, I would have been like right off the green if I had enough curl, but the extra mile just did not have enough curl to bring you out in that direction. But it may be that you could get that shot done with an apocalypse. And while it doesn't have as much topspin, it's got about the same topspin as an extra mile 8. We have some options on this hole, and I'm gonna continue to explore the options on this hole because these holes are you know, as far as tournament wise goes, they're relatively new, and so I have a plan on what I can do on this hole, but I'm going to explore this hole some more to see if there's some way that I can get closer to it to increase my odds of getting an eagle, because starting off the round with an eagle is super important, and this is a hole that we can get an eagle on. Hole number 2, this par 5 right here. All right. So I came at this hole. I was using a berserker on this hole. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can go at it. I'll talk about what I was doing first. So with an EM at the time, an EM 8, max topspin, max OP. So max OP, max topspin. I was going first bounce. I was in this area here, first bounce with the OP and using the wind, getting out into this area right here. First bounce here, second bounce clearing, and then running up into this area. If you're in the sand or the rough, anywhere pretty much in front of that line, and you've got a Spitfire or Nirvana, you can recover. If you're over here in trouble, you're SOL. And if you're with a Nirvana, it's a little bit better, but your Spitfire can get it done, and it's got lots of topspin so that you can hit it. But this terrain up here, it's kind of hard to see in this 2D picture, but this is how it looks. Starting from right here, you're up on the top. And then going down to the sand, you're going down into the hole, and then you're coming back up to the green. And so it's one of those shots where it's going to carry a little bit farther when you're down in here, but when it's down, when you hit down into this area, it wants to take a bounce that's very close to, and you can get a lot of run forward and get your distance wrong. So if you're laying up back here, it's a difficult shot if you're going down into this hole to try and bring it back up, because you're coming from way back here and you're coming way down into the hole, and then it wants to take that forward, bounce forward, and roll out really quick. Whereas if you're hitting on flat ground, it goes, takes a bounce, and then it takes a bounce, and then it takes a bounce, and so you're getting normal type bounces. I did like the idea of getting way the hell up here, and if you're anywhere in trouble up here, you can easily get on. Ideally, when I was in this area, I wanted to be in front of, this is long iron area down here. So if you get down into this area, you're with a long iron, and there's a pretty short, the Grizzly's got, especially if you got it upper developed, it's got a little bit of backspin, more than what a big a backbone has. And so I think I was bringing a Saturn on this hole because it looks like it's a long ways right here, but the backbone, if you're hitting down into the hole, I wanted to get up here where it was a little flatter, because this terrain, once again, it looks like this and you're coming up to the green. So if you're down in this area right here, you're down here in the hole. And the way that the wind was blowing in the last tournament, going like this, if you make a bad wind adjustment here, you could easily, and I saw a bunch of people, because they're hitting downhill, and I saw a bunch of people over pulling it and then clipping the rough or ending up in the sand right here. And so my goal is to get farther forward so that I was more up here in the flat and use backspin to come at it. So this is another one of those holes that how I played it in the Summer Major versus how I'm going to play it now is going to be different. Not on the drive, because I still want to get my drive. I still want to take that extra mile and a power 5 ball and try and get out into this area and pound that sucker out there. But how I approach the green is going to be totally different. So I think we can dial this in a little bit more and try and make this hole a little bit better Albie shot if I can put myself in a consistent spot here. You can try and lay it up out here. And you can lay this shot up out here, and you're going to be bringing a wood coming in. So if you've got a bigger wood, my goal is I don't like to put traps into play. So I think if I came out here and I was in that spot, I was having to start off over here and kind of bring it back around to the hole, as opposed to starting here and bouncing over the sand. So we'll have to see kind of how it's playing out, but there is several ways that you can go at it. You can lay it up out here, or you can try and bring out a bigger power ball where you get one bounce here, second bounce here, and then trying to roll forward and ending up down here in the fairway. There is another option that I tried when this hole first came out, where instead of trying to bring out a bigger power 5 ball, it was hard to get it done with an extra mile, but you may be able to get it done if you got an Apocalypse. And I don't think you'd have to have a higher level one, is getting it into this area where you get one bounce here and you get two bounces here, and putting enough curl on it that you can get it to come in this direction. The problem here is that you don't have a lot of room normally when I use curl shots. So if you wanted a bounce here and you wanted a bounce out here so that you could bleed forward in this direction. So if you're thinking about where you're coming in from the tee box, in order to get that done, you're having to do this type of trajectory. So the farther you go to the right, the deeper this rough gets. So you have to have more forward distance. So you set it up, and because curl's not represented in your ball guide, you set it up and your ball guide's going in this direction. And so normally if I was trying to do a shot from the left to the right to try and bring it off in this trajectory, in order to make sure that I had more room to clear here, I would set the shot up farther to the left. Even though I want the ball to go to the right, I'd set it up farther to the left to give myself more room for the curl to become effective. You don't have any room to the left. And so pretty much what you have from here is what you can get. So if you put that curl on it, it's very easy to over curl this, and you'll actually either end up in this sand or you'll end up getting caught up in this rough. And it was hard to get. I found that it was hard to get some forward trajectory. And when I did end up clipping the fairway in these areas, I actually, with an extra mile, I ended up bleeding forward and I ended up getting caught in the rough out here. But that is another way that we can go at it. Instead of doing the max overpower shot from here, we may be able to come out here, and without any overpower, we can change from being from wood here, and we may be able to get into our max long iron out here if we can just get out into this area. So there is some options that we can do on it. I think in practice, so that I'm not burning a lot of 5 power ball, especially with my, I'm going to explore this shot some more, because I'm not interested in laying up out here and having to take that shot with the wood. So I'm interested in getting over to this fairway over here. So it's either going to be the max overpower shot trying to go straight forward, or I'm going to see. I think in practice, at least at the beginning of the week, I'm gonna shoot this shot several times just so that I can see what it looks like again. And I want to make sure in my practice bag that I carry one bag that's got an Apocalypse in it, just for shots like this, so that I can practice that curl and see what happens getting up there. But I think what'll happen a lot of times is that you could get over to the spot, but you'll end up over curling it and clipping this rough, which may not be a bad deal if you just bleed out and you end up right here, because it's definitely better to be right there than right here as far as distance wise, because here you could bring a much better wood than maybe having to bring a big dog if you were back in this area. And I think if you got lower developed stuff and you lay it up right here, which is definitely the safe shot, you're definitely going to have to bring a big dog. But this is another one of those holes that we're going to want to play it a few times to see what's possible with our clubs. But we do have 3 potential ways that we could go for it up at the green. But this is definitely one of those greens I want to get as close as possible. So I'm either in long iron, somewhere in my long iron. Now, okay, when we played these holes, I went straight at all 3 of them with backspin, and I was not dinking around. Because when brand new holes come out, one of the reasons I feel like I'm pretty successful when brand new holes come out is because there's a ton of people who fail on par 3s. They get too tricky. We're trying to learn all of these holes, and they get way too smart on these par 3s, and I'm okay with that, because a lot of people in the summer major failed, and where they failed on these par 3s because they tried to get super tricky on it. And what I did on these holes was I came with a backspin club, whether it be long iron or wood, and I started off as close as I could get to the green, and I went to the green, which in most cases, because of the angle that you're coming at it from the tee box, you'd want to bring a ball that's got 3 side spin. And even with a ball that has side spin, you may have to involve the dreaded word curl. And if you involve the word curl in any shot, it's not a bad deal when you're taking a drive shot. You can work that out because you're not trying to put it in the cup. You're just trying to get to an area, and you've got a little bit of flexibility. You know, you could be 5 yards forward, 5 yards to the side, and it's not going to make that big of a difference. But when you're trying to put the ball in the hole and you involve the word curl, you just diminished your chances. So I know that all of the shots that I took on these par 3s in the summer major, I had very little chance of getting hole-in-one, but I did get hole-in-ones during the week. I had very little chance of getting hole-in-one because I was involving lots of backspin, which diminishes your chance, and I was involving some curl on some of the shots, and that diminishes your chances even more because it's hard to repeat that. So if you're having any problems at all in these par 3s, you can do backspin shots. Now, when we played this the last time, there is some rough bump opportunities, and I think it was in this area right here. And the way the wind was blowing, this is not my cup of tea for rough bumps. This is not normally my deal. I like to take rough bumps where here's the rough and here's the cup. And so I'm coming at it, and I really like to take these when I have some type of a side wind, so that if I make a bad adjustment or I get the elevation wrong and I pull too much this way, the ball's still going to hit in the rough and go forward. If I don't pull enough and it's this way, it's still going to hit the rough and go forward. In this area here, you're so close to the rough, and you've got sand in front. There's a lot of shit that can go wrong on this type of shot, especially if you don't have a super accurate club. And I like to be typically 2 rings off of any transitional surface, so that if you hit a great to the left or the right, you still got room. You'll still hit the rough, because what's the worst thing that can happen when you do a rough bump? You don't hit the rough. You hit the fairway on the left, or you hit the sand on the right. So you want to hit perfect. We all want to hit perfect. But if you don't hit perfect and you have no room for maneuver, you're going for a ride. So if you're having any problems on this hole, you can start off over here and come at it, and we'll need a ball with lots of side spin. So I'm going to explore this because now I have a Grizzly. It's got better ball guide. I got a little bit better look at it. I could start further back down in this area here and see if I can get the side spin to engage to get me going towards the cup, so that I'm not coming at it with so much speed and trying to force it into the hole with backspin. But there is a rough bump here, And so I'm going to look at to kind of see how much room I have on the rough bump to see whether that would work or not. I suppose if you really got brave, there may be even a rough bump that's up in this area right here. You know, just kind of like looking at the hole, you know, there may be a rough bump right. Hey, damn it. There may be a rough bump right here. There may be a rough bump right here. You could try and start it off over here and use side spin to get it to go to the hole. You could come up closer to it and use backspin. So we have a lot of options on these par threes. And what it's really going to boil down to is which way is the wind blowing during the tournament. Because on this sand, on these rough bumps, look at the shadow that's right here. And look at the shadow that's right here. And so if the wind is blowing in such a way that I have to maneuver the ball over the sand, so like the wind is blowing in this direction, for instance, and I've got to pull over that sand, there's no way I'm going to do that rough bump because it's so deep. That sand looks like this. Here's the rough, and then bam, it goes into the sand. And so when you pull your ball guide over that transition, it's going to make a hop, and it'll constantly throw your adjustment off. And so a lot of this is going to be dependent on which way the wind's blowing. So you can come into it in the practice round and go, yeah, I got this. And I've done this before. I've done it here in a couple tournaments ago. I practiced on one of these par threes and I dialed a shot in. I mean, I was hammering hole-in-ones. Then we got in the tournament and the wind was blowing such that I had to now pull over this sand trap and it threw my whole shot off and I had to change shots. So don't get married to any one shot. Try them all out to see what the possibilities are. And then once the wind comes out in the tournament, we'll be able to dial that in. But you can, if you're having any problems on this, you don't have to get greedy. You can come out into this area right here and try and bring it to the hole. And bring a side spin ball that's appropriate. And we'll have to work out the elevation when we're out there, depending on what club we're using and where we're deciding to hit. Because you can't tell me that there's different spots out here and it's not going to be the same. And we need to leave ourselves a little bit of room for maneuver on these par threes. Hole number 4. I'm not going to say that this is a must-get eagle, but it's pretty dang close. And on hole number 4, I was bringing an extra mile and a Titan. And I think I was using an extra mile and a Titan. And you could bring a bigger power ball. And I brought a bigger power ball out here. So you're coming from the tee box. Let's get back so we can see if we can scroll out enough to get the tee in it. So we can draw some lines. So if we draw some lines here, here's the tee box and there's the pin. You're obviously not going to be able to follow that line. So you're going to have to bring the ball out to this area and then get it to come back to the cup. So you've got to cover this swing right here. And when I first came out here during the beginning of the week, what was happening was I wasn't using enough curl. So I was setting myself up in the spot and I was ending up in the rough right up here. And if you look at the way that the rough is, here's the narrowest spot right here. So this is the shortest distance from this fairway area to this fairway area. And the farther you go to the right, the longer you have to hit your shot. And I was ending up in the rough right here, where if you look to the left, there was fairway. But if you look where I was at, I was in the rough. And so I was getting my trajectory a little wrong. And as the week went on, I got to the point where I was just using max curl. So I was using an extra mile and a Titan. And I was doing max overpower, max curl, and getting the ball to travel in, starting off in this area here and getting the ball to travel in this direction so that I could bleed through that rough and end up on the green or just right off the green. Now you can bring a bigger power ball here, but then it gets into a point of you're trying to finesse it where you're trying to get one bounce here and one bounce here, and then you're trying to bounce over that rough. And I was getting too cute with it at the beginning of the week. But this is once again another one of those holes that we have to get up here and get through that rough. Now you can lay yourself up here in front, and that's going to be relatively easy. You're not going to have to use overpower, and you're going to be in like a mid, maybe towards max wedge shot, and that's going to be a super consistent shot to do too, where you just have to hit perfect. The goal, if you're trying to get over to the other side, the reason you're trying to get over to the other side is because you could be so close that you know it's not a gimme, but you could probably hit it great to the left or the right and perfect, and it's still going to go in the hole. Whereas if you're laying yourself up out here trying to take this shot, you need to hit it perfect. So if you have confidence in your perfect shot, just lay it up right here in front, and you're going to have a beautiful, very, very short wedge shot to get to the cup. Or we can try and get to the other side. And I'm probably going to be the guy who tries to get to the other side. I don't think it's not too difficult to get through this. I would just need to get that shot dialed in so that it's more consistent. And I'm going to try and work it out where I don't have to do the max OP. So I may end up bringing a bigger power ball here so that I can get that trajectory right with the bounces, so that I end up either clipping the rough and rolling out towards the green, or clearing it between the second and the third bounce and seeing what kind of distance I have. But we definitely want to try and go to get on the green in one here. And the way we do that is by hitting to this side right here, trying to get this type of trajectory. And you can get it done with an extra mile 8 and a Titan, but it does take max overpower and max curl. Quick scattering report on that one. But this hole right here is definitely an eagleable hole. And like I said, it's not that we have to get an eagle on it, but we're going to need to get an eagle on this hole. The minimum score in this tournament is -13. And this hole right here is not part of the -13. So there's another par 4 that's even easier that we absolutely have to get an eagle on. But this one right here, we're going to need to get this eagle if we want to have any chance at a win in this tournament. Hole number 5. And this is another one of those holes. I came at it. This is hole number 5. So the way that I played it in the last tournament, and I actually made several hole-in-ones on this hole during the week. And the way I was playing, I was bringing I came onto this side right here, and I brought I think I was playing it with, there's several different ways that you could do it. You could bring a bigger ball to push your red line forward, and you could play it with a Saturn so that you could try and backspin it to the cup. You could bring a smaller ball where you could use your Guardian and try and backspin it to the cup. That's the safe way. And that's how I played it all week, because like I said, when we get brand new holes, I don't dink around on these par 3s. I know that I give up a few opportunities because there's people out there that are working on the par 3s, but I'm more focused on trying to get eagles on the par 4s and not epic failing on the par 3s. But here, what I think I'm going to be working on this week is trying to do the bounce over to bring it up to the hole, because now we have a grizzly in our bag. Okay. Here's some observations about a lot of these types of shots that I've seen in this course. A lot of these types of areas. A lot of not a lot, but let's say half of the transitions between fairway areas and roughs in the game are like this, where the fairway ends right here, and this is fairway, this is rough. There's a lot of holes in this Acacia Reserve that are like this. And here's the transition, and this is rough, and this is fairway. And so when I say that for myself, my personal game, I'm always 2 rings off of any transitional surface, I'm not counting on this hole. I'm counting the transitional surface as here's the rough, here's the fairway. I'm 2 rings back from that spot because it's flat. And sometimes in those positions where it's flat like this, you can give yourself 1 room of separation, as long as the wind's not blowing like a due tailwind or something where you could epic fail if you don't make a great wind adjustment. But I'm almost always leaving myself 2 rings of separation. When it's this type of terrain, I don't count this as the transitional point. I count where it starts to drop up here, where you're starting to see that drop. I count that as the transitional point, and I'm 2 rings back from that point. So I'm setting up out here, not pushing the limits. So you can see on this hole how it drops down here. And what I saw on this hole and several of the holes in this tournament from the summer major is that people were digging down too far into that hole. And so for my taste, they were, number 1, digging too far down into the hole, and number 2, they weren't making great wind adjustments. So think about how it works. If you find yourself in that type of terrain like this, and you hit up here, it comes in, and then it takes a bounce and goes forward, right? And it acts like it normally does when it's bouncing. But if you come in here, 2 things happen. Number one, it carried farther because you were downhill. And so you needed to make an elevation adjustment because of your landing spot. And number two, when it hits down here, it's hitting on this downhill. It takes a flat bounce. And instead of bouncing from here over to here, it bounces from here and it goes straight across. And I saw a lot of people on the holes in this course where they were hitting way down on it and then it would come flat out of it and they'd either end up short, and there's several of them where they'd either end up short or they'd end up in the sand, and it was a bad deal. So if you're hitting from this side over here, give yourself some room. There's no reason why you have to push. You're setting the shot up and trying to dial it in. And so why wouldn't you, when you very first set that shot up, give yourself some room for maneuver? There's no reason to push the limit. You're not shooting the shot so that you take the risk every time of ending up in the rough or ending up taking that flat trajectory. You're setting it up over here so that you can get the ball to go from here and bounce over and then bounce towards the cup. So why wouldn't you set yourself up so that right from the get-go, you've got plenty of room? So if you're setting those shots up from the other side, give yourself some room. I know you watch a lot of other people's videos that put out content for Golf Clash, and they're like, the only way that you can do this shot, everybody, and make it is if you are a quarter of your gold ring. So your ball guide's right here, and you've got to be a quarter of your gold ring off there, and you've got to be 3/16 of your ring off on the front, and you have to hit it perfect. And if you don't, you're in the rough or the sand, but that's not my problem. You have to hit. That's the only place you can hit it. That's BS. Move that club, that ball out, and give yourself 3 rings of separation in an area like this and set the shot up from there. If you start the week off doing that, then by the end of the week, you'll have this shot figured out. Okay. So pick safe spots when you're coming into these greens, especially on these par 3s. These par 3s will eat your lunch, ruin your round. Now, there is another thing that we could do here that I did not explore in the first tournament is we can do a rough bump. So we can do a rough bump down here, but from this area here, it's kind of like in the pit, and then you're coming up to the green. So you're hitting in a downhill area trying to run it up, and I'm not sure what kind of topspin, but there is a rough bump opportunity that we can do here. So looking at it, we've got 3 ways. You can go way number 1, rough bump would be way number 2, or you could work your shot up here, which would be 3. And this shot 3, you could split into a 4th where you bring out a different ball where you're either in your wood or you're in your long iron, depending on which one you want to use. Maybe you don't have a wood that's got lots of backspin, and maybe your Guardian's upper developed and you like coming at it with your Guardian. So we have different ways that we can come at this hole. If I can put John on the screen. Rookie. All righty then. What's funny about these holes is when they first came out, I came out and played, and I got albatross. I albatrossed, and it was eagle in these holes and just lighten it up the first day they came out. And this hole right here is one, the very first time I ever shot this hole, I got an Albie. And I did it with an Extra Mile, a Titan, and a Saturn. And now that we have a Grizzly, I will bring my Grizzly instead of my backbone. The thing about using the backbone, what I found, let's talk about the drive first. So your red line's right in this area right here. And what I was doing was I was max topspin on an EM8. And I was just rubbing up against the nubs as far as like overpower. And I was leaving about, if you were in like the 3.5, maybe up to maybe about 4 miles per hour of wind, I was leaving that wind in there. So the wind, I think in the last tournament was blowing like in this direction. I was taking the side wind out and then pushing the power back in it. So when you think about which way the wind was blowing, I think the wind was blowing actually more kind of like in this direction. And so I was taking, if you had a 4 mile per hour wind, you're actually got about 2 miles per hour of forward push on it. And so I was putting that wind back in, and I was just barely rubbing up against the nubs, and I was ending up right there. And what I was trying to do was end up so that I was clear of this sand. I didn't want to involve that sand. And if I hit a grate to the right, I wanted to still be able to miss the sand. So I wasn't trying to get close. And then I wanted to get where I could get in front of this. I didn't want to have to start off over here on the side and bring it up. And if I brought a backbone in order to get this, so if I ended up with my backbone and I was in this area out here, and you draw the line to the cup, then I had to start off over here and then I had to bring it back to the hole. Whereas if I brought a club that had a little bit of backspin on it, I could start on the other side of that and I could go straight to the hole. So I wasn't having to maneuver the ball quite as much. And so what I saw was a lot of people trying to hit this with their backbone. And so in order to get the line right, so that they could miss that, they were involving the sand. They were trying to rub up against that sand and get right over here so that they could straighten that line out. And so they were putting the sand more into play. And I'm not really interested in putting the sand into play. I want to be right out into that area. You could bring a 4-power ball here and you probably wouldn't have to do any overpower, and you could take the wind out, and that would really be ideal because the wind is a variable. If the wind's blowing in this direction, in this round we have a 2.8 wind, in the next round we have a 3.6, and the next round we have a 5.0, and you're leaving wind in, then one time you're going to be a little short, one time you're going to be in the perfect spot, and the next time you're going to be in the rough, and that's not acceptable. You want to get a great Albie shot here. So I really think probably the best way to go with this, so you don't have to do any of that and you can take the wind out, is to bring a 4-power ball. And that way you can set yourself up out in this area, take the wind completely out of the equation, and then hit yourself out into this area. You'll have to establish how much topspin to put on, and you may come out here the very first time and end up in the rough or end up short and then have to work that topspin number so you know that it's 5 topspin or 4.5 topspin. I was doing the same shot with my Extra Mile 6 that was in my lower level account, and I was ending up in the same exact area with the same shot. So it's not like you have to have an upper level Extra Mile to get this done. But trying to get out into this area and then coming right at it. And with the Grizzly in the bag now, I'm going to switch from a Saturn to a Grizzly just because it's more accurate. But I really like the shot with the Saturn, and I feel super comfortable. And the thing I like about the Saturn is you've got some options. So when we look down into this area down here, what do we see? We could do, if we had a straight in shot coming to the green, or if you were a little bit on this angle, you could start out here where you can pull it back a little bit and try and run it up to it. Or you could do a rough bump here. And if the wind's blowing kind of in this direction, that's kind of a good deal, because if you mess up your wind adjustment, it's going to push you to the left, or it's going to pull you to the right and you're still in the rough. So you could do a rough bump from this area, trying to rough bump it to get it into the hole. Or you could start in front of the rough and try and get it into the hole. Or you could start off here to the side and try and get into the hole. So we have lots of options depending on where you're consistently landing. So if you're consistently landing, and if you decide that, hey, I really, really like that rough bump, then don't be like a lot of people in this game is like, you go, hey, I really like the rough bump. And so from where the hole is, drawing that out, if you like that rough bump, then, the further you can get to the left on the drive, the more you're going to get in line with the rough bump. So you don't have to use any side spin. It's just a matter of putting on a little bit of top spin or back spin, or in this case, it'll definitely be top spin. But so if you like a shot, or you're ending up in this spot right here and you're going, man, I really like that rough bump, but I don't have any room for maneuver. I'm too close out here. Then you need to focus on getting your drive further out here so that you change the angle that you're approaching this rough, so that now instead of having to hit over here on the side of the rough, you're able to hit up here at the tip where you've got room to the left or the right. And it may be the difference in the ball. A 4-power ball might be better. If you bring a 4-power ball, you may have a better chance of getting out here. An APOC may help you get out there because it's got a little bit more curl and you could get out into the spot. But I definitely like working this area either on the rough or in front, as opposed to trying to come at it from over here. And that the way that this rolls too, it's very easy to roll off the back and get too much on it and roll off. I'm not sure if I ended up in the sand here, but I do remember this green as being finicky as far as if you hit it with too much speed, it would roll past the cup and you would end up a long ways away. All right. This is definitely a par 5 that we can get Albies on this par 5. This is a par 5 that we can get Albies on. So trying to work out like how you want to do that second shot is going to be really important. And then once you figure out how you really want to play the second shot, start looking at your landing zone to see, is my landing zone helping me with my second shot, or is it not putting me quite in the right spot? Hole number 7. All right, this is another one of those ones. I came at this one with the Guardian. And once again, first time playing these par threes, I don't mess around. I'm going right at it with, I do not want to fail. I want to give myself some, like, roll the dice and have to roll 100 to get a hole in one, but always get a birdie is definitely more beneficial than screwing up. And I talked about earlier about these landing pads, and I was talking about the terrain where you get the drop off or you get that flat transition between the fairway and the rough, or you get the area like this. This is definitely this type of terrain. It drops off a lot in the front. And this hole right here, I saw more people during the summer major epic fail because they got down into this area and there's a ridge that's running up here, and they got into this area and they pushed the issue down here on the bottom. And when they hit, they came in really nice and they hit and overhit and they hit the rough, or they came in and they got it right and they did hit the fairway, and then it took this type of a trajectory and it went straight across, and they ended up either in the sand, clipping the rough, or clipping this little hill right here, and then it rolled back down into the rough. I saw that happen a bunch during the summer major. So if you're going to use this hill to bounce over, there is a ridge right here. And if you decide that you want to hit on the forward side of that ridge, you're on the downhill side, you've got to expect that your ball is not going to do a normal trajectory. So you're going to want to be a little bit farther back so that you can get a normal forward trajectory. This is another one of those holes that you could do, depending on which way the wind's blowing, you could do a rough bump. This is not my typical type of rough bump shot because of the angle that it's running. So if the wind was blowing with that and blowing in this direction or blowing in this direction, those two, then that rough bump's probably not a bad deal. Because if you make a bad adjustment, you're to the left or you're to the right. But if it's blowing in any other way, it's blowing you either into the sand or into the fairway. And so that's not good. And I'm not going to take that big of a risk. This is a pretty narrow little rough area. So we'll have to see how the wind's blowing and what the situation is. But for those of you that have a Grizzly, some of these rough bumps that in the past have been super dangerous, they're better because a Grizzly's so accurate that, if you take your Saturn, for instance, a ring is 1.9, well, that's 2 rings on a Grizzly. So in areas where you'd come out here with a backbone, and most people are going to have backbones like in the 1.4, you may only give yourself 1 ring of maneuver, whereas if you bring in a Grizzly, you got a ring and a half. So it'll change. It'll be dependent. Really, this par 3 is going to be dependent on the wind. What I'm going to practice this week, because it's really difficult to come in from this direction. What I was doing was I was coming in with a Guardian and a Quasar, and I was starting blue ring off of this transition down in this area. So I was 3 rings off of this transitional point. My ball guide's going out here. I had backspin, side spin, curl, and I was bringing the ball back around. And it is a low, I'm going to do that in capital letters, low chance for a hole in one. But I got birdie on this hole 100% of the time in the tournament. So if you're having any problems at all on this hole, you can backspin it in with a Guardian and a Quasar. But what I'm going to explore this week is I am going to look at the shot coming from over here with my Grizzly and see what kind of look I have on that. And I am going to look at the rough bump here just to give that a look and see kind of how wide this rough is. But I'm going to be working on these at the beginning of the week. And if I don't feel like, or if I don't find a shot that I like over here, I'm definitely going to just put the ball up, get my birdie, and move on to the next hole. And if you're new and you've got lower developed clubs and you're having any issues at all, your Saturn and your Guardian are your friends. Now this is the par 4 that you have to get an eagle on. It's not an option. And I was using an Extra Mile and a Titan. And I'm starting off in this zone right here. And the way that I'm starting that off in this zone is I want to have it so that I've got my gold ring, and then I've got my orange ring, and I want to start it off so that I am centered between this side and this side. I don't want to be leaning up on one side or the other. It's going off in this direction right here, so I'm using side spin to bring it off into here. And I don't believe I was using any overpower at all. It was just a matter of you have to hit it perfect to get through this gap. And with an extra mile 8 at the time, max topspin, I might have been doing, I don't think I was using any overpower on it. I think I was just letting it float, and I was taking the wind out and trying to get it up there. You can get up on the green. The green's got a little bit of a backboard here, and you can kind of float it down towards the cup. Even if you end up out here, you still got a great shot. What you don't want to do is end up in the rough or the sand down here. So you have to hit that drive shot perfect. But we have to get an eagle on this hole. I mean, that's just going to be, it's so, you have to get an eagle on this hole. If you want any shot at all of getting up towards the top of the charts and getting a top 10 and getting a banner, this hole has to be one of the holes that you picked up an eagle on every single time. And there's just no two ways around it. And there really isn't, I mean, there's probably other ways that you can play this hole, but you can hit it straight up, and it's all about hitting it perfect. If you don't have an extra mile 8, as far as topspin goes, if you got a lower ball, you can bring, or a lower club, you can bring out a bigger ball. And don't blame me about the ball thing. I mean, Playdemic doesn't build these holes so that you can go out on them and play them all with a white ball. They build these holes so that in holes like this, the deciding factor between whether or not you get an easy eagle or you have to struggle could be the difference between a 3 power ball and a 5 power ball. They're not crazy. They make these holes so that it encourages you to have to buy 5 power balls or 4 power balls or have that ball collection. That's just the way that the game works. So if you've got lower developed stuff, or if you're finding that you have to put on any overpower, you're not quite getting up there, you can pop out a 4 power ball or possibly even a 5 power ball if that's what it takes to consistently get on the green. Hole number 9. All right. In my mind, there's 3 ways that you can play this hole. You can shoot out to here. You can shoot out to here. One way that I never saw, I tried it in practice, and I actually liked it. I like the look of it. It's not too much different of a look from here, is that you can go forward through this and end up down in this area. And to get down here was really easy because on this particular shot, I was able to use a QB. Whereas the other shots, like to get out into this area, I wasn't able to get far enough out into this area with a QB. And I think I had to bring out, at the time, the rock wasn't buffed up. You could probably use a rock if you got a rock in your bag. But I think I had to use a bigger club, like an extra mile. Here's what I don't like about either one of these 2 shots. Okay, this shot obviously is going to be a little bit easier because you're using a QB versus an extra mile. But if you end up epic failing anywhere out here in the rough, anywhere here in the rough, anywhere here in the rough, anywhere down here, you are screwed. Okay? Because you can't get on. And even if you get in the right spot, let's say you come out here and you go, yeah, I'm in the perfect spot. I'm right there. I'm right there. I'm right there. I'm in the perfect spot. You just gave yourself a super tough second shot because this picture does not accurately represent how deep it is to right there. So from up here, you're up here and you're hitting down into that hollow, and then you're going up to the hole. And what's between you in this deep spot and the green? A patch of rough. And I saw a lot of people get this shot wrong, where they were coming in from this spot right here and they're hitting way down into that hole, and they get the wind adjustment wrong, and they either overpulled and hit here. And what does it do when you're hitting on the downhill? It takes its next bounce and it goes straight forward, and they ended up going bam and hitting either the fairway right there or the rough, and the ball did not travel forward very far. If you get the bounce right and you're down in the very bottom and you get your stuff right, it could bounce out of it. Or they came in and they hit this hill face, and then it went a straight up in the air shot, and they ended up in the rough or ended up still in the fairway that they were hitting from. So this shot right here from here into that is rough. And if you've got lower developed stuff, it's going to take a big wood, because, I mean, draw the arc here. I mean, you're out in this area right here. This is big dog area. And so you're going to need to bring a big wood if you're out anywhere on this side right here. So I will never demo the shot for you over here, because in my mind, why would I work so hard to get into an area that if I epic fail, I'm screwed? And even if I make it, I've got a super hard second shot. I'm not gonna put in the effort to put myself in that area. The whole idea is to put yourself in an area where you have a chance at Albie. And so from the tee box, how many of you have a big topper in your bag? Pretty much everybody. I mean, unless you've only played about 60 games, everybody's got a big topper in their bag. And pound for pound, if you have an extra mile and you have like a big topper 4, and at that point, if you had an extra mile 8 and you had a big topper 4, pretty much every step along the way, as your extra mile goes up and your big topper goes up, pretty much every step along the way, you will net more yards with a big topper and a Titan than you will with an extra mile and a Titan. The only time that's not true is if you have to, like, you can't, your big topper can't make it over to this side right here, and you've got to pull back and you're not using max club. But this hole right here definitely lends itself to big topper. And with 100% topspin, all of the topspin, you can bleed yourself out into this area right here. And not only have you picked up more forward distance on the arc than what you can achieve if you were over in this spot or over in this spot, but you have a much better angle to the green. So instead of having to come in at it where you're bouncing in here and trying to deal with this type of a hill where you're way down in the pit and you've got this rough in front of you, you can come at it when you're out in here. You have several options. You can bring out a big backspin club like a Guardian. And I put a Guardian in my bag so that and here's the thing, I hedged my bet on this hole. If I got to where I wanted to out here, what I really wanted to do was a rough bump. And I found that it took with my Guardian, it really took very little, if any, topspin. It's kind of on a hill face right here, and it came out really kind of hot. So you can do a rough bump right here, or you can use the Guardian and you can start up at the top and you can try and do the backspin in. So depending on where you end up out here will depend kind of like what kind of club we're going to bring. But we do have a rough bump here, and that rough bump, you got plenty of room. So it would almost be impossible to not end up hitting the rough so that you get the movement forward. The deal is that we may be shooting that a little bit blind where our ball guide's not giving us a good read going to the cup. So I'm gonna this hole here, I'm gonna work on my second shot is what I'm gonna be focused on. I am 100% confident that I'm taking a big topper and coming out into this area. But how I'm going to approach the hole, I may bring a sniper. Now the thing about a sniper is if you hit in the wrong area, because it doesn't have as much raw distance as a Guardian. If you don't catch it all and you end up a little bit further back, or if you end up too far forward, it may be if you end up in the wrong spot where you don't have quite the angle on the rough bump. So I think what I was doing in the last tournament was I was hedging my bets. And there was a lot of people that were epic failing on this hole. And so what I wanted to do was come out here and never epic fail, but at least give myself a chance for Albie. But in this tournament, I think we're going to have a much better chance of dialing this hole in. And I think the rough bump is a way to go. If you find yourself out in trouble out here, I think this way coming in is a much better way than coming in this way. So if you find yourself in any trouble and you have to bring it in, this way here is a very harsh angle to try and get it over, and you're putting more rough into play. This has a backboard on it, so if you get into any kind of trouble, bringing it around this way and trying to ride that backboard to get up towards the green is probably a better way to get out of trouble than using this shot over here. But if we end up in the right spot out here, I definitely I'm going to work on that rough bump this week and see what we can accomplish with the rough bump to try and get that in the hole. So I know, like, we went through all the holes right there. I know it sounds like I've only played these holes once, and we played them in the summer major. In the summer major, the way that it was working was if you shot, there's two holes that there's the one par 4, what was that, 7 or 8, that we have to pick up. We absolutely have to pick it up. And it must have been hole number 8. So we absolutely have to pick this hole up. So that took our -12 to a -13. We had to shoot a -13, and that put us at -26 in the weekend round. And if you could pick up a couple shots per side and put yourself at the -30, you had a serious chance of a win. But I think this is going to be exactly like the spring major. In the spring major, we played the dreaded dunes, and in the dreaded dunes, if you shot somewhere between a minus 28 and a minus 30 was a winning score. Minus 28 could potentially get you a banner. Not in every bracket, but in most brackets, this is this is where you were looking at. In the spring major that we just shot, a minus 30 was about as low as you could get and have any shot at a win. I got really lucky and ended up in a very weak bracket. And while there was four people, ended up four people at minus 30, three or four people at minus 30, I was able to win with a minus 30. But in a lot of brackets, it was minus 30 plus, and we saw some monster scores last week. And I think the same thing's going to happen in this particular tournament. Is we've got a lot of people who play Tour 9 who are very familiar with these holes that are going to come down, and they play rookie tournaments, and they've got some of the stuff dialed in. So there's going to be a ton of stuff in the community this week because these holes have now been out for a year, almost a year, on different ways to play these holes than what we played them in the summer major. So I really think that while our minimum score is minus 26 a round for a full round, we're probably going to have to pick up no less than 2 to put us at minus 30. And we're going to be looking at, just like in the spring major, where we're going to have to pick up probably 3 per side, and we're going to have to be at a minus 32 plus in order to have any shot at a win. And that's not going to be in every bracket. There's going to be some brackets out there that you're going to be able to come in a little bit lower, but I think that this tournament's actually going to be, in some respects, maybe even lower scoring than the last tournament, even though the last tournament had a ton of holes that we could get on. I think a solid round is going to be between minus 30 and minus 32, and that's what we're going to be looking at, with a minus 26 as our minimum. All right. I will, what I'm going to do is put this scouting report. How long was this? 56 minutes. I'm going to put this scouting report at the top. I put a playlist in YouTube. You go in and look at my my playlists. There's one in there for the Golf Clash Safari Sunrise Rookie Scouting Report, and I put 9 holes in there for everybody to look at. I think a lot of those holes, I was at a party that summer, and everybody was partying and stuff, and I was out there shooting. A little bit of background noise. But if you like the stuff, hit subscribe, and hopefully everybody has a great week. And I'm going to just have some fun this week and go out and play. I'm really freaking burned out on tournaments. We've had 5 tournaments in the last 6 weeks, and I'm really completely burned out on them. So I'm just going to go out and play and have fun. I don't know how well my notes will be as the week goes on because I'm just fried. I wish the code, the actual Golf Clash notebook or Golf Clash code would get sick and they would say, hey, we're not going to have a tournament next week. We're self-isolating is what I'd really like. I'd like to have about 3 weeks off. So I will catch you out there on the course, and everybody have a great week. And let's have some fun this week. And let's just go out and have some fun and just play the holes and just have a good time. Thanks for watching.